Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to have all of you joining us today. We're actually going into a journey that is really high-level compliance. You see, here at eXp, we want to make sure that each and every one of you remain compliant. Well, that's fantastic, Stuart. How do we do that? Well, there's two acronyms. There's two acronyms that really comes to top of mind. The first one is the one that scares everybody. FICA. Oh man, don't we just love FICA? Asking our clients for ID numbers, proof of residence, etc., etc., etc. But there's another one. There's another one that I feel that is actually even more important. And the reason why it's more important is for most agents, they go out, they find a buyer, a seller, they do the deal, they earn the commission, and then they actually say, hey, cheers, and they spend the commission, but they never have a further conversation with that particular client. Why is that? Well, it's all because they didn't know their client. And that leads me to the second of the acronyms. It's the KYC. Know your client or know your customer. You see, when you get to know your customer, you're building a deeper relationship. When you build a deeper relationship, commission, well, that's just a bonus. Having those deeper relationships with your clients helps you to carry on where you can do the second, the third, the fourth. And in fact, it's actually shown one client that gives you one deal. The first deal will be worth probably around about 100,000 Rand in your pocket. Over 10 years is worth nearly R1 million in your pocket. So for those of you that have actually taken your clients and said, thank you for the commission and cheers, you've just thrown away 900,000 Rand and given it to somebody else. So how do we actually go about making sure that we can remain compliant at the highest possible level? Well, that's why at eXp, we've actually now partnered up with guys that actually went through one name and then they changed to another name, which did confuse people for a moment. I will say for a moment. But now they're coming into a name that I'm hoping that there isn't any clicks in the name, like certain parts of the country, and it's just nCino. So joining me today is Justin. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, and yourself, Stuart?
They're always fantastic. As you can see, a lot of energy that comes into these particular sessions. So, Justin, DocFox, nCino. All right. For some, those are two different companies, but in fact, there was a migration. Give us a little bit of a history, DocFox, where it came, what it's about, its migration to nCino, just to put everybody into the picture so that we know what we're actually talking about.
Absolutely, Stuart. So yes, quite rightly said. So just to sort of go back a bit in time, the company was started, which was called DocFox. And what DocFox sort of identified in the market is that if you ever tried to do FICA before actually using a system like a DocFox system, it was a very laborious and onerous task. Like Stuart said, I think there was a misunderstanding of what FICA was. FICA was not just collect a proof of address, collect a proof of ID, and you move on. There's a lot more that goes into FICA. And to even take it further than that is the FICA is continuously updating their own regulations, their rules. And previously, FICA was like a tick box exercise. You know, everyone followed kind of the same tick box exercise, and you thought you're good to go. But exactly like Stuart said, FICA goes hand in hand with KYC, right? Know your client. And I mean, I'm looking at a few people on this call today, and you all seem like very lovely people. You don't throw any red flags at me or alarm bells. But if I had to go maybe do a digger or deeper dive into you, there may be a lot of red flags that I didn't know. And I think that the important part is we're protecting ourselves as a country. We're also protecting businesses that we work for, eXp being the one he mentioned today, where you're trying to grow a business and you don't want to put any of your clients at risk, both the buyer, both the seller, person even renting properties. You don't want to put those people at risk by taking money or putting money into places that the money is not legitimate for money laundering. So like I said, it used to be a huge laborious task to go ahead and do this on a manual basis if you did it correctly, that is. So things like that is what we identified and created a system that's everything's in one place for you to do a KYC check or a FICA check on your clients. And we've obviously grown and enhanced since then. We've made the system more and more and released more functions and features, but again, always ticking in the one specific requirement. it's not always about having a fancy system that can do amazing things, but you always want to make sure that the regulation is being checked off each and every time. And that's what's great about our system is we configure it according to your risk-based approach, right? That's what every single accountable institution, whether it be eXp or another real estate company, you all have a risk-based approach. So one thing to remember is if you ever get clients saying, oh, but X, Y, and Z didn't ask me for that, why are you asking me for it? It's because everyone has their own risk-based approach, and also they may not be doing it correctly. eXp may be the only one doing it correctly. And that's something just important to note if you ever are wondering why you get that pushback. But yeah, nonetheless, so then DocFox sort of continued for quite some time. And then last year, March, we did get an acquisition through a company called nCino. So yes, there's no clicks or clacks in the name. It's straightforward nCino. Where did the name nCino come from? It's actually a funny story. There is no true sort of way that they created nCino. It was just sort of made up on the spot, but just made up, and it sounded like it worked quite well. But what nCino was doing previously before acquiring us at DocFox was they provide banking system solutions across the world. So it's not just South Africa. They do have South African banks in their names, but they were looking for an onboarding opportunity, someone that could help with onboarding, KYC, and FICA checks. And they came across DocFox, and they have quite a cool model. It's either we sort of build out this thing ourselves and see how much it's going to cost, or we can buy someone that's already doing it. And that is how the acquisition took place. What is quite nice about the acquisition is that it didn't really change much for our customers or our clients. I think everything kind of happened in the background, going smoothly as per usual. But what is the benefit is obviously with that comes a lot more capital power. So we can start looking at better features, better products, services that we can offer our customers, because FICA's not going anywhere. So we can't just put a nail in the head and say, it's over. We're off the gray list. So everyone thinks, oh, we can breathe now. It's not going to be the case. We've got to continue as per usual, right? So yeah, that was pretty much the backstory to where we are now. And only from here on out, we're looking to grow and just make it even better, more useful of a system. And again, we don't want guesswork in the end, right? We want every user to feel comfortable knowing what they're doing. And for all your agents, we're trying to find smoother, quicker ways for you guys to onboard your clients so that you can get your commissions through. But I'll leave that up to Stuart and the guys on the call to discuss that further.
No, fantastic. So that's giving us the nice background. So DocFox, in fact, was just actually an acquisition. And all they did was, well, they had a bad tattoo and they just wanted to change it to a good-looking tattoo that actually had more color. It was a black and white one to a color. So that kind of just sums it up in a simple way. Same company, same body. So Justin, I've got a couple of questions that I want to dig into here, because yes, we've got to start with identifying our particular clients, but I can always just take a picture of them and I've identified them. But as you quite rightly said, it's not just the surface, it's what goes deeper. Do they have those deep, dark secrets that actually now kind of pulls it out to say, hey, be careful. So what are the basic requirements, documents that are required to start the process? Because, I could just send you a picture, but that's not really going to start. What is it that you really need to start identifying that individual so that you can actually dig into them?
Absolutely. So first and foremost is the most simple thing, right? You need the person's name or a legal entity name. Once you've got that, at least you've got something to start doing a bit of research on. Even if you don't yet have a document for them, you could go into Google and just see, what comes up with this guy or this company. Is there anything I need to be worried about? You can try and put in keywords to try and bring back negative media or negative articles. But it's just a good way for you to really start knowing who exactly should I start looking at as a client. But obviously, it's not going to get you to the end point, right? And in terms of what you need to do, it's obviously dependent on the specific client type that you're dealing with. But on a general basis, if you're dealing with an individual, let's say a South African citizen in this case, all you need is a proof of ID. Why do we need a proof of ID? It's because I could just give you a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo. You go and search that, you don't find anything alarming, and you move on. But an ID is actually a document that's been given by an independent third party, right? It's given by the government in this case. And yes, people do forge them and people do try to create their own ones. But again, you are trying to research based on the document you've got. You've got now an ID number. And if somebody has played around with that ID number on the document they've given to you, you can then also, based on the system provisions, check that still against Home Affairs. Home Affairs can obviously bring back a third-party result to say you've entered in this ID number, and we've brought back a result with a name and what belongs to that ID number. That's one first check that you need to do, right? You want to verify that you actually know, does your client actually exist? Are they registered within the Home Affairs database? Are they still alive? Because people do steal people's identities. So they find people that are dead, they take their IDs, put their picture on it, and you're none the wiser that this person's actually a deceased person. So the system also does do that for you, provides you with a death date. Second to that is the proof of address. The proof of address is very important still. Why is it important? Is because you want to ensure that the person actually resides in the country. They're not sort of seeking asylum, or they've escaped from another country and come to your country. You want to verify that there is an address somewhere that you can confirm that this person actually resides or lives, to ensure that their identity is matched with their sort of residency. Often, and as you can see, there's a lot of people have fled to South Africa previously, have committed a numerous amount of crimes overseas, and they've come to our country because it's almost like a safe haven. No one's going to come looking for them here. They believe our police will never find them here. So they just come here to really find a way to get their money into our country, first of all. And it's usually within the millions, sometimes even billions. And then they get their money into our country and they start using our different accountable institutions to clean that money. To say, perfect, I want to buy that beautiful property at the top of Ocean View Drive in Cape Town. Let's use someone like eXp potentially to go and get that money out. So that's why it's just very important that you are collecting at least those two documents. But again, another way to source an identity is something like an income tax document. It's another way to verify somebody's identity. Again, you registered through a government organization or through a third-party provider. So they provided you the details to say, yep, that is correct. That is the right tax number for that person. So that's really from an individual basis. But again, it goes a bit further than that. You do need to also confirm source of funds. Very, very important word or statement. You always hear about that in the FICA world. Is because, again, like I said before, you want to prove that where does this person actually get their money from so that they can pay you or pay for your properties or pay rent. How can you prove that this money's come from a legitimate source? That's what you want to do. Because again, that's the whole thing you're trying to combat. You're trying to combat money laundering and receiving money from potentially terrorist activities or fraud or Ponzi schemes. We hear all these words all the time and you think, I'm never going to fall victim to this, but you do. So it's important that those are the types of documents that you're requesting from, in this case, an individual client. And same thing works for a foreign national in this case, so somebody outside of the South African element. Same types of documents. Yes, you may not get a ID, but you'll get a passport, but it still proves their identity. It's from an independent third party. And for a legal entity, I know it gets a little bit sort of blurred lines of what you actually need to get. But if you think of the legal entity itself, let's excuse their directors and their C-suite for 1 second. Again, you're doing the same process of what you do for an individual. You verify the company's identity. You've proven they've got a head office or some sort of address that they belong to or where they work from. And then after that, again, it's something like a tax document and something like a source of funds. That's it, what you need for the legal entities. Yes, you have to go a little bit further in those checks when you now have to think about it. If I take eXp Realty, just the legal entity itself, can eXp Realty, without any of the people involved, can it do anything? Can it make a decision? Can it send me an email? Could it buy a property by itself? No, it can't. There's people that work behind eXp that fundamentally make every single decision that happens in that legal entity. So those are the people that would be responsible for potentially embezzling money, using the company as a front to money launder, to evade tax. All these atrocities that we see all the time, is coming from the individuals involved. It's not the company, right? It's not the legal entity itself. So that's why came up this word of UBOs, ultimate beneficial owners. So the people that have the power to make decisions on behalf of their business and how it operates. And that is why, as I know, it's not a very fun task to do, but you have to go through to the executive directors or the C-suite, so your CEOs, CFOs, COOs, etc., until you've reached to the point that these are all the people that would be responsible for making any decision on behalf of this company, where the money goes, how they receive their money, and every single operation in between. So that is why, again, the legal entity itself, there might be nothing wrong, but I could go look at one director, and the one director you didn't want to send me documents for, which is very important why I say this, and that's the one that they knew if that person came through, there's going to be a whole bunch of red flags. So that's exactly how smart criminals have become, even, is they always make sure that you don't know about some of the directors, and eventually you give up and you just go with it. And that's what puts you in danger. So again, those documents would be the same: proof of ID, proof of address, just to verify those people's identity.
Brilliant. Well, that was a huge amount of information, and you're going to love what I've got coming back at you, because you've just actually given us something. We started with two acronyms, FICA and KYC. Now you've actually given something, and it was actually quite funny because it's the first time that you said it to me, it sounded like UFO, and I was going, what? I'm intrigued, but it's UBO. And that is actually something that's very interesting, because we deal with human beings. We don't deal with aliens. And in essence, the human beings is the persons that we need to actually uncover. So I got a question, because, all right, so I've got an ID number. I've got a proof of residence. I've uploaded into your system. And well, I could always just, as you said, I could Google it. Maybe I could go into the databases and try and find out, is this ID valid? How does nCino connect with the, let's call it the dark world, the world that we don't have access to confirm all these details? Because how do you find out if this person is flagged to be a criminal? You've only got an ID and a proof of residence. What happens behind the scenes? So you're going to have to pull the curtain back a little bit, allow us in for like a couple of minutes so that we can gaze our eyes, and it's not a UFO world. What exactly does nCino do behind the scenes when we upload our documents?
Absolutely. So great question, Stuart. Like I said, I think there is that confusion within the general world. I mean, I'm not going to say eXp in this case, because you are an accountable institution, you know your responsibilities. But in the general world, like I said, everyone thinks FICA is collect 2 documents, you're done, you proceed. But again, there's a lot that has to happen before you actually can say, I know who my client is, I'm comfortable with proceeding with them. And very good question, Stuart, is, again, one thing that you should be doing, which I think is very, very important, is verifying a person's name, their ID number, against an independent third party. So that's something like a Home Affairs database, which is what our system allows you to do. Next thing would be also verifying that address. If you can verify it versus just Google Maps and you can see the picture of the house, or a very important piece, I think, in the real estate world, is if you can go out to this client and meet them at their premises to confirm, yep, that house exists. I've seen them open the gate. It's definitely theirs. That's also a very good way of verifying it. But we go one step further and we tap into the credit bureaus to determine, does that address actually belong to this person's name or has resided at this address previously? That's something that we do in the background as well. So we do pull information of different data sources. We're not just requiring you to load a document and say, well, thank you for your documents, let's move on. But to jump into the KYC part, Stuart, and this is where it gets very important, is the other leg of completing a FICA process. And it's a non-negotiable. You have to do this. And that is ensuring that you are screening meaning taking your client's name and information that you know about them now, and verifying if they exist on something called the Targeted Financial Sanctions List. That's the one list you always hear about, that name from the FIC, and that is sanctioned human beings or companies, etc. You are not allowed to do business with people on the Targeted Financial Sanctions List. If you pick up anyone that's on that list, it's not, but can we? No. It's a no-no. It's an immediate report through to your compliance officer, who will then report that to the FIC directly to take it further. But that's only one of the lists that are mentioned by the FIC. But there's so many other lists that exist in this world. One list that we specifically at nCino now work on is something called the politically exposed list, or the domestic politically exposed list. And we have created a comprehensive acronym version. Now it's called DPEP. That's the abbreviation for it. But yes, that's the all your presidents, your prime ministers, your secretaries of states, your president's brother, your president's sister, nephews, goes all along the family trees. But I think, I don't even know how many names are on this list by now, but I think it's about 17,000 names that are there. And those are your politically exposed human beings. Those are the people that run this country, make big decisions that happen in this country. I mean, we don't have to, beat around the bush. We know our country's been unfortunately exposed to a lot of corruption and a lot of embezzlement, and helping criminals from all over the world bring their money here, and we've been taking part in their actions. So something like that is also very important. Not every single political person is a bad person. No one is saying that. But again, you got to watch out for those types of people that do pose a higher risk than your normal day-to-day South African or individual client. So we also screen against that in the background. And there's a various other lists. There's the UN 1267 list. So that's where your sort of sanctions list comes from. And there's a lot of other lists that we do have embedded in the system. Now, I don't know if you or anyone on this call has ever actually gone to try and do a sanction screening using an Excel spreadsheet that you download from the FIC. If you ever get spare time, please go to the FIC website, try download the targeted financial sanctions list. It's an Excel spreadsheet. And then your job is to go try find if a client exists on that. You can take any of your clients and go try it. But that is what people used to do. That's what you had to do, is just use that spreadsheet and hope that your client wasn't on it. Hence why people didn't do it, because it's just a laborious task. You don't want to do that. So what helps with our system, and it helps with you guys, is that we screen the minute you create an application. So if you go and put a Justin Israel on our system, even if you didn't put my ID number, it's perfectly fine. All I need is that name. And it goes straight through. We screen against the various lists that are embedded into the system. It's automatic to get a result back, if there is a result, that is. And we're not just screening for exactly my name, right? Because I'm smart. I know you're going to look for Justin Israel, so I'll put myself as an acronym. I'm going to say Jazza Israel. Now, we're looking for acronyms. We're looking for names that are close to as similar as possible to your client's name, so that you don't potentially miss out that one of these hits that come back is actually your client. What's beautiful about that is that it's ongoing screening. So as long as a client is active in your world, because remember, it takes some time for properties to be transferred over. So it can be 4 months, 6 months, sometimes a year, however long it takes. That's still an active client of yours. So you don't want to run the risk that through the course of this transaction being completed, something happens while you are still responsible for that client. Because that might change your mind, right? If you know that the person's on a sanctions list, it's 4 months into your relationship, you don't want to be part of that anymore, because it puts you at risk. So we do continuous screening in the background for you as well. Nothing for you to initiate that. Just create the application, keep it active, and we will do the rest in the background for you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for giving us more acronyms. We started with 2, we're now up 4, and I think by the end of the session, we'll end up with 10, because Justin is bringing us more. So I want to then dig in a little bit deeper and just make sure that I understand this. We go into the nCino platform. We update our documents. So we're filling in all the applications, their names and all of that. We're putting in the documents. nCino is not just a simple platform that kind of goes, all right, this is a good guy. This is a bad guy. It actually is taking it and it's doing the comparison with a variety of credit bureaus to get validations. There's also various databases out there that it's actually doing references to. And all of this really is saving time. As an individual, you could probably do it yourself, but as you said, these databases are huge and there's probably multiples of them. So you would maybe spend a week, maybe 2 weeks doing everything, but there's one key element that really you highlighted here. What you do today, which means you're going to have to do it again in about 2 months, 3 months, 4 months' time. Your system is doing it on an ongoing basis, because today I'm good, tomorrow I'm a criminal. And now we need to make sure that we watch out from that. So I have another little question, hopefully no more acronyms in it. We've come across certain individuals, and it's normally people that were born, and I want to say they are more mature. They then decided to go and update their IDs. And our lovely Home Affairs decided to go and change the last 3 numbers, those last 3 digits. Now, they've got a green ID and they've got a new ID. And they've remembered their green ID, and now they go in, and that's the ID that they go ahead and put onto the systems. But as well as that green ID is what's on, call it the deeds office, because that's what it's been registered for. Now they come into your system. Does your system recognize that that ID number has been changed in a legitimate way from a Home Affairs point of view? Because that is obviously the big question mark. What happens now?
Yeah, so that's exactly what should be happening from a Home Affairs side, right? So as long as Home Affairs have updated their information according for that specific client you're trying to load, if you go and refresh, for example, you've already created an application for your client and it was using that green book number. And now since maybe you've not done a transaction with them for some time, they've gone ahead and got that smart ID. If you go and refresh that data at any point, remember you do have to refeature clients, which I'm sure we're going to touch on in a second. But if you need to ever refeature your clients, you are going to ask them for up-to-date documentation, or at least just refresh Home Affairs to make sure, yep, the person's still alive, the person's not dead anymore, oh, not dead. But again, it's just so that you know that Home Affairs is updating their information continuously. And again, from our side is that we are providing you with that data exactly what Home Affairs has. So if they haven't changed anything in Home Affairs, then we won't be able to obviously give you that information. But if they update it with Home Affairs, then we will be able to pull back the same information Home Affairs has.
Brilliant. So that's all in the same thing, because that's obviously a big question. Hey, I need to go digital because my great-great-great-grandson said I must do it, and they did it, and now things have changed, and they're busy selling on their particular house. So another point that's going to come through is we have a lot of blue chip companies. These are companies that are on the stock exchange. They've gone through all of their processes and, well, they want to sell one of their buildings. So it's actually in the actual company's name. Now, we know to go and get FICA for a director of a listed company, many times there's not just one director. There could be 300 directors, and that is actually creating a bit of a challenge. What do we do with listed companies that are at that level that are now selling or buying a company? How do we go through that process?
So obviously in the ideal world, it would be to, business as usual, as if you're doing with a private company, doing the same process for a listed company. But the nice part about listed companies is that they obviously go through a lot of stricter controls and stricter regulatory requirements, which allows for you to almost act in a way a little bit differently to how you would treat a private company. Not to say it's always the best way to go. Always try your best to follow the right process, and that's go and ask each and every director for their documents, whether it be a proof of address, a proof of ID. Usually they do have something called a FICA pack, because I know they're going to go through these every time they apply for a bank account, if they're applying for a new property. Usually whoever the authorized signatory is, and that's a very important statement to keep in mind, but the authorized signatory is usually somebody that will provide you with everything you need. But again, we know the difficulties. It's not an easy task to go after 17 to 1,000 directors to ask them for their information. But nice things that you can do, and it's kind of little workarounds to just put you in the right stead. So I'm not saying that you go and use this and that's all you need to do, but it puts you in the right stead to go collecting documents from the right people. Is you can always go onto these listed company websites. You can go straight through to their directorship or their people, and you're looking for someone that's either an executive director or part of the C-suite that you can now pinpoint who are the people I need to ask documents for? So that's one of the first starts. The second starts is also that you also need to prove a source of funds. What's beautiful about that, if with a listed company, think about it, if you go into their website, they always have their annual reports on there. You can actually go and download those annual reports because they can't publish that unless it's been independently audited. So you know that those finances have been checked by someone independent, not just by their company itself. So you can always go and obtain those annual reports. And on top of that, if you ever need to go verify any additional information, you can always go on the JSE website and go and look for that company. It provides you with a whole bunch of information, such as, again, report or findings. You can get their share price from that, so you know exactly where along in terms of their earnings they are. You can go and get their directors, who signed off on any agreements. JSE website provides you with quite a lot of information. But unfortunately, there's no clear cut, this is the right way of doing it with listed companies. There are workarounds. There are some suggested guidance. If you're really struggling and you cannot get the director's information, you're always welcome to reach out to us. We can try and help you as much as we can. But our compliance team can also provide you with a lot of assistance of other ideas of where you can go look at, getting information from.
Perfect. And this is always one of those big things. We do deal with the actual listed companies. So I have two more questions, and then we're going to open up to the Q&A side of it. Is the first one is, and I think it's a question within a particular answer. We go in, we upload all the documents, and suddenly your report gives us the big red screen. It basically is telling us, hey guys, this is like a major cautionary warning. What actually happens from your side? Is it just a notification, or does it actually take a further step to say, hey, something else is being loaded under this particular profile or individual?
Yeah. So I think if I'm correct, where you're referring to is the risk rating once you've completed your set. Okay. So yeah, so when you get to that last section, that's one where it says risk rating on your system. That's where you should now have a good idea about who your client is, right? That's the whole point. Again, a history lesson here is that risk ratings were kind of, again, a little tick box exercise. There was no specifying what you're looking for in terms of risk, except for, is a person who they say they are? And that's really where you moved on from there. But then it became something, like I said, is a risk-based approach. So not every single accountable institution, even ones in the same industry, are following the same risk-based approach. I'm going to say eXp, along with all the other competitors in the real estate services world, you guys may not be doing everything the same. But again, doesn't mean anyone's specifically wrong. It just means it suits the type and way that you conduct your business. So when you get to your risk rating, there's a set of questions and a set of answers. It's simple to the fact that all you're going to do is click on some drop downs and it answers the questions accordingly. Once you've answered all the questions, it then gives you a result. Usually 3 different types of results: low risk, medium risk, high risk. Of course, low risk means you continue with business as per usual. There's no red flags that I need to worry about here. And what's also nice about that is that if this is an existing client of yours, so it stays with you for quite some time, you only technically have to refeature that client every 5 years, let's say. You then get medium risk clients. Now, a medium risk client could be based on the industry they work in, how they receive their money. Maybe there was some negative media articles about them, but nothing that really turns you away from wanting to do business with them. It could just be something as simple as the person actually is a politically exposed person, and that's the only problem with them. But again, doesn't mean that they inherently high risk. It just has a small thing about them that's not your usual low risk client. Those clients, you are welcome to still proceed with business, maybe keep an eye out on them a little bit more, and you refeature those clients maybe every 3 years. So again, you're just reducing now your refeature cycles. Then you get the high risk clients, and that's the one that Stuart's referring to. High risk clients can be for obviously a variety of different reasons. Let's start with the easiest one: sanctioned clients. So no, right? You don't even proceed with doing the transaction with them. It's a high risk because they're on a sanctions list. You seize that relationship, call it a day. But what happens if they're high risk because they're from a high risk country? let's just use South Africa as the example. South Africa was on the grey list. So if you went overseas to try to do business and they accepted your transactions, you would have been treated like a high-risk client. Not because you yourself are a bad person. No one thinks you're a bad person. It's just from the country you're from. And there's a specific country list that if you're on that list, you're a high-risk individual. So if a person's from, let's say, another high-risk country at the moment, like Russia, and they come and do business with you, you've collected all their documents, there's been no red flags, but they have come from Russia, so now they're high risk. That means you still want to proceed with potentially doing business with this person. You're welcome to do business with that person, but you've got to follow something a little bit more than just what we've been talking about now. What we've spoken about now, up till now, is something just called customer due diligence or standard due diligence. You do that for every single client that walks through the door. When you get a high-risk client that you want to do business with, you do something called enhanced due diligence. So you're doing a little bit more than what you do in your current day-to-day due diligence for your clients. Enhanced due diligence could be collecting additional documents. It could be collecting additional information, verifying more information against other third-party data sources that you may use. It can be a variety of different things. How do you know what your enhanced due diligence process is? I can't even tell you what yours is. This is something that's in your risk management compliance program. Very, very important document. If you've never read it, please always feel free to reach out to your compliance officer to ask them about these processes. But once you understand what that, again, it is an acronym, unfortunately, Stuart, it's EDD, that's what it is, but enhanced due diligence, then you would load those documents to prove that you have completed something a bit more. And once it's there, that means you've holistically done a full KYC process, even if it's on a high-risk client as well. And then I think just to end off that part, it would be a high-risk client. If it's somebody that you're going to do business with for an extended period of time, that is someone you would FICA every 1 year, pretty much on that side.
Perfect. Well, there you've actually given us our fifth acronym for the actual session. I said we're halfway there. We're in a world of acronyms. Remember, I said in the beginning, an offer to purchase is not an offer to purchase, it's an OTP. And we go through this entire process. Just imagine you saying to your clients the full words. People get confused with all of that. So I was actually going to lead on to, and you actually answered the final question I want us going to go on to today, which is the re-FICA. Making sure that we do remain compliant with our clients. Remember the three different levels. If it's a person that is the low level, these are people that, well, you want to deal with on an ongoing basis, and you only need to FICA them. I normally work on between 3 to 5 years because things change. They might have different telephone numbers, email addresses. Sometimes their proof of addresses change because they might have moved that, as well as company. Their income sources have changed. They might have changed companies as well. So it's normally 3 to 5 years on that side there. Medium risk, those are those particular clients that kind of get your back going up because something has stood out, but they're still fairly clean. And for me, it's always 1 to 3 years is making sure. But I like to, every time you do a deal and a transaction with them, it's always good just to make sure that everything is up to date. And then obviously the final ones. And for me personally, whenever I'm working with anybody with high risk, fortunately to date, I've never had to do that, but it is part of a policy. I would make sure that you actually go deep and you do your EDD with them every single time. There's the acronym that is going to be the acronym of the day, the EDD of the ADDs. Well, that will go through down quite well. So you want to make sure that you do those enhanced levels so that you can make sure that that client still remains pretty clean. But one big note throughout this entire process, if you do come across a person that's on the sanction list, if you come across a person that has been red flagged or something is standing out from eXp with immediate effect, get hold of your transactional specialist. They'll know exactly how to deal with all of that, to hand that over to our compliance officer, which is Mark Luca, to make sure that everything is handled correctly. We don't want you to go down a path where you are becoming a non-compliant person, because ultimately you're not going to get paid commission. That is one of the biggest keys on it. We remain compliant to make sure that your commission is safe. Remember, one non-compliant person affects an entire company, not just that person. Remember, FIC doesn't just go over the individual, they go over the individual and the company. So there's a bigger element to it. So you want to make sure that everything remains compliant. That's why we obviously have trusted nCino to make sure that everything remains compliant. With your KYC is where it all starts, making sure that that FICA is in place and making sure that the last part, which is the risk profiles, gets a happy sale. And the great thing with it, for most of us, we won't come across red flagged clients. For most of us, we're not going to come across these clients that are a little bit on the dodgy side, but it's every now and again they do actually come through. Justin, I want to thank you so much for your time on coming into this particular session. Any final words before I jump into a Q&A?
No specific final words. I think just for everyone's sake on the call, so that you do know. So currently I am running a special sessions for eXp users and agents. I do it usually every Friday. Unless something changes on that day, then I may cancel it. But it's just there for a Q&A session. It's, go through what you've done over the week. Maybe if you stuck at a specific point on the system, or maybe you don't know if it's your first time using the system, so you just want to kind of learn a few things. We've had some very, very interactive sessions there. I know, for example, like Bongi comes often to the sessions, but it's just there to help you, to guide you, so that you're not waiting for maybe a long time to get an answer. At least you know that every week you can bring all your questions, show you how everything works on the system. If it's something super compliance based, I usually ask you to please present that through to our compliance team. Alternatively, sometimes it may be an eXp requirement. So if there is an eXp transactional specialist on the call, they usually help to answer the question. Alternatively, I always direct it back to say, this is something that you can ask your eXp leadership team. Besides for that, just happy we're off the grey list. So I think we can move forward. And I think we're very well equipped as a country now. I look at my clients and how they operate on FICA, and I'm feeling quite positive for the future that we could stay off that grey list for a very long time. So
Perfect. Yeah. Do join Justin on Friday. So it's every Friday, and I think you're doing it around about 1 p.m. I think the time is. So do look out. We do share that out on the actual training calendar, where you can bring your questions, asking Justin, and he's there to help and assist through this process. The importance of going through this is to remain compliant. That's the key, and the underpin from everything here is to make sure that everybody remains compliant, the company remains compliant, because a company that is compliant, their doors remain open. A company that's non-compliant, their doors become shut. So on the back end of that, I want to thank everybody for coming on. Justin, it was an absolute pleasure to go through the system and getting to know you a little bit better. Hopefully we'll do more sessions like this in the future. So thank you so much for coming onto this particular call. My name is Stuart, and I want to thank all of you for coming onto here. Until next time, we're going to be going through different suppliers, seeing how they help us in our particular business. So from myself, Stuart, I want to wish you all a fantastic day further. It's cheers for now.